I was there when you thought no one noticed, when you whispered prayers not even you believed would be heard, and when you stood at the edge of your breaking point but said nothing, did nothing, except endure. You thought you were just surviving another hardship, but I had already activated the final exam of your faith, the last hidden trial that only those close to my purpose undergo. It wasn't labeled as a test, because the deepest tests come disguised in everyday pain. And so, I observed you, not to condemn, not to punish, but to see what would rise from your core when no instruction was given, when the storm came without warning. Every sigh you let out in exhaustion, every time you chose to love when it would have been easier to walk away, every second you resisted the pull of bitterness, it was counted. The real test isn't when you feel strong. The real test is when you're drained and you still don't let go of me. That's when heaven records your name not as a survivor, but as a finisher. And I need you to know this. It began the moment you thought I was distant. It started when you begged for answers and heard silence. You assumed I was ignoring you, but I was grading your endurance. I was measuring what was growing in you when everything around you looked like it was falling apart. You didn't realize the setup wasn't for your destruction. It was for your confirmation. Even when you failed in your own eyes, I looked deeper. I saw that you stayed. You didn't run from the fire. You stayed in it until your impurities melted and your real strength was revealed. And now, child, that test is over, but I'm not done speaking. Because what I'm about to tell you next will shake the very foundation of what you thought was possible. You didn't just carry the pressure of your circumstances. You bore the invisible burdens that no one could see, the responsibilities that drained you in silence, and the internal battles that waged war within your soul while you kept smiling on the outside. I didn't remove the weight, not because I wanted to see you suffer, but because I knew what it was doing to your spiritual muscle. It was refining what you never knew existed. I assigned that weight like a crown in disguise, not to crush you, but to awaken the authority buried inside your persistence. You held on when it was too heavy. You walked when your legs trembled beneath you. You breathed when the air felt too thick with pressure. That load was calibrated to expose whether your faith could remain alive when logic said it was finished. People around you assumed you were fine, but I watched you carry silent loads meant for giants. And the truth is, giants are exactly what I was shaping you into. Each time you didn't collapse under the spiritual pressure, something eternal was carved into your identity. That weight was not random. It was divine. It was laced with purpose. It exposed your depth, your loyalty, your unshakable hope that something greater had to come, even if everything seemed delayed. You had opportunities to complain, to retaliate, to shut down emotionally, but instead you whispered trust. Even when you didn't understand me, you didn't walk away from me. That weight broke others, but it revealed you. It forced out the counterfeit and made room for the authentic. And now that you've carried what was meant to be unbearable, you're about to step into what no one else could qualify for. Because the weight wasn't just a trial, it was a key. And you carried it across the finish line. What comes next will not require your effort, but your obedience. The test is concluded, but the results haven't even begun to manifest. It's why you must listen carefully now, because what I reveal next cannot be missed. There were nights when silence screamed louder than your thoughts, when the pillow caught what your voice couldn't say aloud. You reached your hands into emptiness hoping for a signal, a sound, a breath from me, and when nothing came, your tears became prayers. I did not overlook them. Every drop held the weight of a battle. Every tear carried the story of a soul refusing to let go, even when bruised. Those weren't just tears. They were prophetic declarations, unnoticed by those around you, but written into eternal records by angels. You wept not because you were weak, but because you still hoped despite being exhausted. You mourned the delays, the betrayals, the rejections, the shattered expectations, yet your spirit remained anchored to me. And I watched how you chose to feel deeply rather than harden yourself. I watched how you refused to numb your heart, even though shutting down would have been easier. You let yourself be real before me. Not religious, not rehearsed, but raw and broken, honest and desperate. That was the moment your worship became fire on my altar. You didn't know it, but while you were weeping in the dark, I was planting something new in the soil of your surrender. I was measuring your tears not as weakness, but as sacred ink, writing your next chapter, lining up your vindication. Your tears were not wasted, they were multiplied. Where man saw breakdown, I saw breakthrough. Where you thought nothing changed, the heavens shifted. You didn't need a crowd. You had covenant. You didn't need a stage. You had substance. And now, child, I'm responding to every tear that fell in faith. The ones you forgot, I remembered. The ones you tried to hide, I collected. And from those tears, I am building a testimony that cannot be erased. Prepare now, because what comes next will dry your eyes with miracles they won't be able to explain. They saw your scars but didn't see your survival. They heard your silence and assumed surrender, not realizing silence was your battlefield, and you were winning. Whispers behind your back predicted your collapse, not knowing you were built in places they'll never visit. What was forged in secret, they could never comprehend. I let their words reach your ears, not to harm, but to reveal the difference between who speaks and who stands. You were mocked for staying calm, labeled weak for not reacting, yet every moment you chose restraint over revenge. I elevated your name in realms they cannot access. They misunderstood your gentleness as powerlessness. But while they laughed, I wrote legacy. While they mocked, I molded a mantle on your shoulders. You didn't argue back because your assignment was too costly to explain to unspiritual minds. And though their voices were loud, you stayed hidden in me, and that obedience created earthquakes in the unseen. I know they thought it was over for you, that you'd fold under the weight of everything stacked against you. But you didn't fold. You adapted. You didn't break, you bent. You didn't curse, you consecrated. You didn't announce your process. You endured it. That's why you're still here, and that's why their disbelief will be silenced by what I do next. The very ones who expected you to vanish will be the ones most stunned by your rise. They dismissed your pain, but they are not prepared for your power. They assumed you were disqualified, yet you were being qualified through the fire they never had to walk through. You carried the weight that was strategically crafted to crush your identity, and instead, you became stronger than the voices, wiser than the critics, deeper than the doubt. That's why what I'm placing in your hands cannot be measured by public approval, because I gave you private victories that don't need applause. Keep walking forward now. What comes next will not make sense to them, but it will confirm everything I whispered to you in the dark. You stood in places where the promise felt buried under pressure, and still, your heart leaned toward me. I withheld the outcome to reveal the motive. Not because I questioned your love, but because I wanted to show you how real it was. You could have walked away when the journey lost all signs of progress, but instead, you surrendered deeper. You weren't bribed by blessing, and that's what set you apart. You didn't stay because everything was working. You stayed because you believed I was still worthy. When comfort disappeared and certainty vanished, your faith didn't flinch. That's what qualified you. I made the pathway unclear on purpose, not to confuse you, but to reveal whether your trust was anchored to clarity or to me. And while others sought results, you sought relationship. You reached for my heart when there was no evidence I was still writing your story. That's where everything shifted. That's when the heavens whispered your name. That's when I turned the page, because you passed what few ever recognize as the actual test, choosing me for who I am, not what I give. You didn't know it, but in that moment, eternity recorded your surrender as victory. You didn't realize that every time you said yes without knowing what it would cost, chains broken generations behind you. There's power in unconditional obedience, and you carried it with reverence. You walked away from temporary satisfaction to remain aligned with what you couldn't yet see. The world offered shortcuts, but you refused them. Pain came uninvited, but you didn't let it define you. You allowed it to deepen your devotion instead. And that's why, even though you couldn't see the reward. It's been growing behind the veil, waiting for this moment. I will not let your obedience echo into nothing. What I'm about to release will make sense of every step that felt senseless. Because love without conditions carries a weight that pulls heaven to earth. Stay with me now. The unveiling is just beginning, and I'm not finished speaking. In the loneliest hours, when it felt like even the air was heavy with silence, you still spoke to me. Not with loud declarations or bold confidence, but with quiet desperation, holy ache, sacred trembling. I watched you walk through spaces where my presence felt distant, yet you continued to call upon me with the few words your soul could manage. That single act moved dimensions. While others would have cursed the quiet or drowned it in distractions, you leaned into it. You chose to believe I was still listening when there was no echo, no confirmation, no visible trace of me. You whispered my name not because you felt strong, but because your spirit remembered who I am even when your emotions didn't. That soft, broken whisper was louder than any choir. It shattered realms where darkness thought it had won. You didn't realize it, but every whisper became a weapon. Every breath that still chose me despite the absence of clarity became a trumpet in the unseen, announcing that faith still stood its ground. I heard you when the world did not. I listened while everyone else overlooked your struggle. And the choice to keep my name on your lips when your heart was raw and your mind was flooded with doubt was the moment you shifted everything. It wasn't your strength that won the battle, it was your surrender. It was a refusal to forget me, even when I seemed far. You didn't just survive those moments, you rewrote the atmosphere around you. You reminded the darkness that I was still the center of your hope, even when there was nothing left to hold. I didn't step in immediately because the whisper was doing what no breakthrough could. It was revealing the root of your devotion. And now, because of that sacred endurance, I'm about to respond in a way you never imagined. Not because you earned it, but because you proved what few ever prove, that my name means more than the answers. Stay with me now, because what you whispered in the valley, I'm about to shout from the mountain. That moment when everything collapsed at once, the pressure, the betrayal, the silence, the inner warfare. I watched you pause at the edge of surrender. The heaviness pressed against your very soul, bending the edges of your will. Even heaven grew still, watching to see what your next move would be. You stood in a place few reach, where quitting looks logical and endurance feels unbearable. And even in that fragile instant, when your heart questioned everything, you didn't run. You didn't announce your pain. You didn't demand rescue. You stood. Not because you had answers, but because you refused to retreat from what you knew I had spoken long ago. Your stillness wasn't weakness, it was intercession in motion. While others would have crumbled or compromised, you chose to remain grounded. That silence wasn't empty. It was charged with the weight of your decision to trust me even with no visible support. And while nothing changed around you in that hour, everything shifted in the spiritual realm. Because that kind of resolve isn't taught. It's born in fire. I saw what you held back. I saw how your soul trembled, how your body ached, how your emotions screamed for relief, but still you stood. Angels observed it, stunned by your restraint. You didn't see it, but all of heaven witnessed that act of unshaken commitment. That moment marked you. That moment rewrote what the enemy tried to conclude about your story. What was meant to be your breaking point became the cornerstone of your promotion. I never left during that standstill. I simply stepped back to let your spirit prove what had been growing quietly within you all along. That stand, it carried authority. It pierced timelines. It shook chains loose from generations behind you. And now, because you didn't flee when everything inside you said run, I'm about to open something so rare, it could only be given to the one who endured that day. And this is only the beginning, because what I reveal next is why you had to stand in the first place. Hell misread your silence. The enemy mistook your exhaustion for surrender, your quietness for defeat. He assumed you had reached the end, that you were moments from giving up, but what he didn't recognize was that you were in the middle of divine refinement, not ruin. While darkness applauded prematurely, You were being processed in sacred fire. You were being peeled of layers that could not go with you into your next. You weren't losing, you were being made. While the adversary released taunts and accusations, I was shaping your heart to hold what I was preparing to entrust you with. Every misunderstood silence, every delayed answer, every hidden breakthrough was part of the furnace that perfected your discernment, your sensitivity, your hunger for me alone. The enemy danced over ashes, thinking the story was over, unaware that I breathed life into what the world calls finished. You didn't retaliate when he mocked. You didn't crumble when he whispered lies. Instead, you allowed the process to complete its work, even when it stripped you of comfort. That is why you were never defeated, because while you looked like you were standing still, I was fortifying you behind the veil. Refinement is not punishment. It is promotion in disguise. I was not punishing your progress. I was preparing it for permanence. And the enemy celebrated too early, unaware that I allow pruning before flourishing. You weren't discarded. You were planted. And what grows after fire doesn't bow to storms. What rises after ridicule doesn't shrink in front of crowds. I let him see just enough to believe he had won, only to expose his foolishness by raising you from the ashes in plain view. Now watch. The very battlefield where he rejoiced will become the platform where my glory erupts through your life. This isn't the end of your story. It's the chapter he was never ready for. And what I show you next will shake everything he tried to steal. It was never about flawless performance. It was about resolve. The moments when you stumbled but didn't stay down, when you failed but didn't abandon the path, when you questioned everything but still kept moving, that's where the victory was sealed. I never looked for the one who never cried, never doubted, never faltered. I searched for the one who would remain when the cost felt unbearable. That was you. You passed not because you always got it right, but because you never left the process. When the journey made no sense, you stayed. When my presence felt far, you kept going. You didn't wait to understand. You chose to endure. And that decision echoed louder in heaven than any prayer of perfection ever could. You were forged in days that didn't applaud you. You were proven in hours that stretched your soul. I tested what couldn't be seen, your root system, your loyalty when no reward was in sight. And even when your heart was trembling, your feet didn't leave the assignment. That's what made the heavens shift. Because in a world that runs from pressure, you stayed planted. In a culture that seeks comfort, you chose covenant. You may not have seen it in the moment, but every hour you remained aligned with my word. Even while bleeding inside, it wrote chapters of authority into your spirit. You were never required to be spotless. You were only required to be faithful. And you were. That's what separates the called from the chosen. The ones who refuse to leave, even when it hurts. Your endurance wasn't random. It was being recorded. Every silent decision, every private battle, every surrendered moment counted. And now, I declare it, you passed the final measure. You outlasted the trial that was designed to expose your limits. And because of that, I'm unlocking realms of influence, favor, and access that cannot be revoked. But don't move yet, because what I reveal next will show you what the test truly protected you from. There was a moment, buried in the unnoticed days, when no light broke through, no voices encouraged, and every road felt like exile. That valley wasn't just a location, it was a proving ground. You stood there not because you were certain, but because you refused to turn back. What you didn't see in that valley with the roar it created beyond the natural. When you chose to move forward with no clear map, the foundations of delay cracked beneath your obedience. Every step you took on dry land rattled realms of resistance. You thought you were walking through stillness, but your persistence was an earthquake to unseen barriers. Every hesitation you overcame, every doubt you silenced, every breath you took when quitting seemed easier. Those moments ignited forces you didn't even know were waiting. The gates that stood before your breakthrough weren't just closed, they were fortified with years of generational hindrance, unspoken patterns, and ancient walls. But your yes in the wilderness became a battering ram. You didn't scream. You didn't force your way. You simply kept going when standing still would have made more sense. That's what tore open the locks. Your breakthrough wasn't triggered by chance. It was activated by sacrifice. What moved heaven wasn't a grand gesture, but a hidden decision that cost you your comfort, your timing, your will. That's what struck the spiritual threshold and shattered the seals. Your obedience cracked doors that hadn't budged for decades. And now, you're standing on the other side of a shaking, not a collapse, but a clearance. Not a disaster, but a divine detonation of everything that once held you back. Prepare to see access, favor, alignment, and acceleration flow in, not because it's easy now, but because you demolished what blocked the way. I'm not just bringing you out. I'm ushering you into territory no one thought could be reached. Stay alert, because what I uncover next carries keys you've never held before. You prayed with passion. You believed with persistence. But then came the silence, a silence not born of absence but of observation. I didn't step in when you asked, not because I ignored you, but because I needed to watch what your heart would do without immediate results. Delay wasn't denial, it was divine clarity. Would you still follow me when the doors stayed shut? Would you still declare my goodness when the timeline was torn? I didn't test you with tragedy. I examined you with distance. Not to harm you, but to reveal the motive behind your prayers. You see, many chase me for what I can release. But I waited, not to break you, but to let the core of your affection come into view. And I saw something rare. I saw a child not obsessed with reward, but rooted in relationship. When nothing changed, your love didn't waver. When others stopped waiting, you remained in position. I heard you say, even if you don't come today, I'll still stay. That statement rewrote everything. Because love that doesn't depend on outcomes is love I can build nations on. You weren't seeking me for what I do, you were longing for me because of who I am. That's why I've come now, not with scraps, but with strategy. Not with leftovers, but with legacy. I was never withholding, I was refining. I needed to know if your heart would remain tethered to me without guarantees. And now that it's clear, now that you've chosen me beyond blessings, beyond comfort, beyond closure, I'm about to move in ways you've never seen. You gave me your waiting, now I'm giving you my wonders. But stay close, because what I reveal next will expose why the wait had to last this long. I watched you walk through shadows with no confirmation in sight, no breakthrough to celebrate, no visible reason to lift your voice, and yet, you did. Not for what I had given, but because you believed I was still worthy. That kind of praise is not common. It is costly. Anyone can sing when the miracle arrives. But you raised your voice while the silence still lingered, and that offering rose like incense through dimensions. You weren't praising me to manipulate an outcome. You were declaring who I am even while your hands remained empty. That moved more than you know. It wasn't your words that made heaven tremble. It was the posture of a heart that said, even now, I will worship. I measured the moment you stood in lack and still called me faithful. That moment weighed more than 1,000 victories sung from places of abundance. Because what you did broke open spiritual atmospheres. You praised me in the drought, and that unlocked rains that had been held back for years. You didn't praise out of habit, you praised through pain. And when you did, it shattered the lie that said I was only good when the outcome is favorable. You proved otherwise. You made a declaration without music, without applause, without evidence. And that was the sound that moved angels into motion. That was the fragrance that reached my throne faster than any earthly request. You didn't even realize the authority you were releasing. But I did. And now, because you've proven your devotion without seeing results, I'm about to release results you never thought were coming. Because true praise, the kind that comes from ashes, always provokes divine visitation. Stay with me, because what you hear next will be the sound of promises arriving wrapped in glory. There was a holy shift, invisible to your eyes but monumental in the spirit. When your questions faded and surrender took their place, you didn't get the answers you wanted. The path remained unclear. The pain didn't instantly subside. But something deeper happened. Your posture changed. No longer driven by the need for an explanation, you chose alignment. That yes wasn't casual. It was costly. It came from a place stripped of demands, emptied of expectations, free of negotiation. You let go of timelines. You released control. You gave me your consent without conditions. That one word, yes, whispered through trembling lips, weighed more than volumes of theology. It was obedience without guarantees. It was availability without blueprint. It was devotion at its rawest. And that moment silenced every voice of accusation, every voice that said you needed to understand before you could obey. I didn't require your comprehension. I wanted your consent. And when you gave it, not with certainty but with courage, something eternal broke open. The test was never about performance. It was about trust. And when your heart no longer demanded clarity, heaven roared with response. That yes became a key, unlocking what years of striving could not. You moved from explanation to encounter. You graduated from survival to surrender. I wasn't looking for someone who had all the facts. I was waiting for someone who would follow even when it hurt. And you did. You chose to believe that I was still leading, even when every door remained shut. That's what ended the examination. Not because I ran out of questions, but because your response revealed the depth of your transformation. And now that surrender has spoken louder than the silence, I'm releasing what the silence was protecting. What comes next wasn't delayed. It was preserved for the one who would say yes before seeing the full picture. Get ready, because your agreement with heaven just set history in motion. You thought those quiet decisions didn't matter. The choices you made when no one acknowledged your restraint, the sacrifices that cost you deeply yet went unnoticed by those around you. I saw every one of them. The moments you chose truth over convenience, purity over popularity, integrity over opportunity. Those weren't wasted. They were weighted. I didn't need crowds to witness your loyalty, because I was measuring it myself. While others sought platforms, you were building altars. While many pursued applause, you pursued alignment. And that hidden obedience, it's what shifted everything. You didn't know it, but each time you laid down your will for mine, something in the spirit moved. Every time you stayed silent instead of defending yourself, chose peace instead of revenge, prayed for those who wronged you instead of cursing them, heaven kept record. Not for punishment but for promotion. I weigh faithfulness, not flash. And your hidden yes became heavier than loud declarations that lacked cost. That's why things are about to accelerate, because the scale is no longer balanced. It's tilted in your direction. Your decisions in the dark caused a divine imbalance, and now the weight of glory must respond. I watched long enough. I stored every act of quiet surrender, and now I'm releasing the harvest reserved for those who didn't need to be seen to remain faithful. You obeyed when obedience was lonely. You submitted when rebellion would have felt easier. And now the windows above you are trembling with the pressure of fulfilled promises. This is not a random reward. It's the consequence of consistent surrender. Get ready. The tipping point has been reached. And what I unveil next will flood the space you once called empty. What you conquered behind closed doors is now echoing in places you haven't stepped into yet. The battles no one knew about, the temptations you overcame in silence, the secret wars you fought within yourself. Those unseen triumphs weren't invisible to me. They were prophetic seeds. You thought you were just surviving, but you were establishing legal authority in realms others only speak about. And now, because you remained steadfast when no eyes applauded, I'm orchestrating a reversal that will be undeniable. I didn't need you to prove yourself publicly. I needed you to win privately. The strength you built in silence is about to speak for you louder than any defense ever could. You didn't post about the nights you cried or the days you almost collapsed. But I've written every one into the fabric of your next chapter. What was developed in the hidden place now qualifies you to stand in spaces where visibility demands character. This is why I kept you veiled. This is why I said no when you begged for early access. I wasn't holding you back. I was ensuring you'd be unshakable when I revealed you. And now, the alignment has arrived. Your integrity in isolation has triggered divine exposure. Not the kind that exalts ego, but the kind that magnifies my hand on your life. The rooms you're about to enter weren't unlocked by networking. They were opened by purity. And the tables being set for you now are not rewards for ambition. They are recognition of spiritual authority gained through fire. They don't know what it cost you, but they will see what I do through you. And those who questioned your silence will soon witness the reason for it. This turnaround won't be subtle. I'm making it obvious. But stay steady, because what I reveal next carries a weight only the refined can bear. What's about to unfold in your life cannot be traced to influence, favor from man, connections, or strategies. It will carry a signature so divine that even your enemies will be forced to admit, only I could have done it. I watched how you refused shortcuts. I observed how you rejected opportunities that would have exalted your name but compromised your calling. You didn't manipulate your way forward. You didn't chase validation. You didn't settle for counterfeits just to feel seen. That's why I'm giving you something that no human being will be able to steal, explain, or replicate. This isn't compensation, it's confirmation. It confirms you waited, you withstood, you obeyed without bargaining. And because of that, I will now place in your hands a manifestation that glorifies me, not you. You will not need to defend your rise. The evidence will silence the critics. The outcome will remove all doubt. I am not bringing increase that blends in. I am delivering fulfillment that breaks patterns. What comes next won't be the result of hustle. It will be the fruit of holiness. The doors that open won't require force. They'll recognize you. The blessings that arrive won't be recycled. They'll be tailored. You gave me space to do it my way, and now I'm going to do it in a way that rewrites every limit you thought existed. No one will be able to say they made you. No one will be able to claim they opened the way. Because when I do it without fingerprints from man. I do it so completely that it shuts the mouths of doubters and shocks those who discounted you. So hold your posture. What you're about to step into has never been done this way before. And it's only the beginning, because what I release next carries generational weight you've been prepared to carry alone. There are places I have reserved not for the talented, not for the loud, not for the ambitious, but for the proven. These are realms that can only be accessed through surrender, and you've been unknowingly walking through the refining process that prepared you for them. The doors I'm opening will be crowded. They won't be filled with many voices. These rooms demand a level of purity that can't be faked, a level of discernment that cannot be bought, a level of spiritual maturity that only comes through deep cost. I am not placing you in circles to impress others. I'm positioning you in atmospheres to shift them. And only those who've endured what you have can carry that kind of weight. You didn't just survive the shaking. You emerged trustworthy. You didn't just cry through the testing. You allowed the fire to burn away what couldn't go with you. And now, I'm preparing to sit you among voices that influence nations, but you won't be there to observe. You'll be there to carry oil. What I'm unlocking isn't about visibility. It's about authority. You didn't chase these rooms. They're responding to your obedience. You didn't force your way in. I'm sending for you. Because I know you won't contaminate the space. I know you won't trade intimacy for applause. I know your loyalty to me is deeper than the opportunity. That's why I waited this long. That's why I shielded you from invitations that weren't ready for the version of you I was building. But now the hour has come. The right doors, the right tables, the right alignments, all of it is being assembled. And when you step in, don't shrink. Don't second guess. You belong there not because you earned it, but because you passed what others escaped. This is what consecration was always about. But remain near, because what I reveal next will carry strategies only whispered in sanctified places. You didn't cheat your way here. You didn't skip steps. You didn't pretend the pain didn't exist or mask the weight you were carrying. You walked the full distance when many turned around halfway. You chose to stay in the fire when others begged for a way out. And now that you're stepping into a moment prepared by endurance, not luck, do not downplay your survival. You have nothing to be ashamed of. The road you took was costly. It emptied you of pride, stripped you of self-dependence, and crushed every illusion of control. That is not something to be hidden. That's proof that what's coming is not built on sand. I saw you when you sat in silence rather than chase sympathy. I saw you take blows and still extend kindness. I watched you stand when others crumbled under the same pressure. And now that you've emerged from the trial, not just breathing, but transformed, do not shrink to make others comfortable. You didn't bypass the agony. You didn't manipulate the timing. You were faithful when no one clapped, and that's why you carry oil that cannot be imitated. Many want the outcome you're walking into, but few would have lasted through the nights you lived through. I know what it cost you. And you must know, you didn't just survive for yourself. You became a testimony others will need. What you carry now is evidence of what I can do with a soul that refuses to run. And those who doubted you, overlooked you, or labeled you too early, they are about to watch the fullness of my promise rise upon your life. Don't hold back. Don't explain yourself. Don't soften what I've done in you to appease those who refuse the same refining. This isn't pride. This is permission. Permission to walk in boldness because you didn't choose the easy way out. And now that you've come this far, keep listening, because what I reveal next will not only elevate you, it will liberate those still trapped in what you just overcame. You're not stepping into this moment because of timing, fortune, or coincidence. What's unfolding before you is not the product of charm or chance. It's the consequence of choosing me in secret, when no spotlight affirmed you, when no confirmation came quickly, when no one celebrated the battles you won behind closed doors. This door responds to truth, not talent. It opens only for the one who remained when leaving seemed justifiable. You passed through seasons of contradiction, when what I promised didn't match what you were walking through, and you still held on to my voice. That kind of allegiance shakes the unseen world and unlocks dimensions the crowd will never access. You didn't demand an audience. You stayed pure in obscurity. And now, this isn't just an opportunity. It's an unveiling of what I've been storing for the heart that didn't require attention to remain obedient. This door doesn't swing because you begged, it moves because you aligned. I watched how you refused to compare your path, how you didn't rush the process, how you allowed me to build layer upon layer of surrender when it would have been easier to perform. That's why this moment will not slip away. I've ordained it. I've sealed it. And no hand can shut what I have authorized to open. Let this be your confidence. This door is the result of loyalty under pressure. It was never delayed, it was defended. Guarded until your spirit could carry it without distortion. Don't hesitate as you cross this threshold. Don't question whether you're ready. The moment hath been waiting for you, not the other way around. And now that you're stepping in, keep listening, because what I'm about to place on your life next carries generational consequence, and it will require a posture you've never held before. You wondered why so many doors stayed locked, why recognition never seemed to land on your name, why those with less depth advanced while you remained unseen. You questioned if I had overlooked you, misunderstood your heart, or delayed what you were sure was ready. But child, I wasn't neglecting you. I was protecting what I was building inside you. Exposure before refinement would have compromised your purpose. If I had unveiled you before the test concluded, you would have walked into rooms without the armor forged in fire. So I covered you. I placed a veil not as rejection, but as preservation. I watched you remain faithful in obscurity, speak truth with no audience, serve while feeling invisible. And every time you resisted the temptation to force visibility, I reinforced your foundation. Not because I was withholding honor, but because I was preparing a structure that wouldn't collapse when elevation came. What's coming requires more than charisma. It demands character. What you're about to carry would have crushed an unprocessed heart. And now, the hidden season has served its purpose. Now the testing has reached its final page. I'm not just removing the cover. I'm unveiling a vessel who can be trusted with what others only admire from a distance. And when I lift the curtain, it will be for display. It will be for deployment. This is not your moment of arrival. It's your moment of release. I'm calling you out of hiding not to prove anything to the world, but to fulfill what I whispered to you in secret. You are not being exposed. You are being established. You didn't miss your moment. You've been maturing for it. And now that you've been forged in silence, what I'm bringing next will not just reveal you. It will confirm that every delay was divine. Prepare your heart, because what opens after this will not be temporary. It will be territory, not a single tear you shed, not one betrayal you endured, not even the confusion that tried to consume your mind was without purpose. Every fragment of your suffering was shaped into the material I'm now using to construct the very ground beneath your next steps. The agony didn't disqualify you. It qualified you to walk in a realm of authority others cannot mimic. You didn't numb yourself to survive. You stayed present through the pressure. That choice to feel every part of the fire and not become bitter has now become the blueprint of the elevation I'm unveiling. You didn't escape the hardship. You absorbed it and allowed it to refine your heart instead of harden it. That's what shifted the blueprint of your future. You see, many survive storms, but few convert the pain into purpose. You did. You took what was meant to destroy your hope and used it as fuel to press closer to me. That's why your next chapter will not be built on fantasy or fluff. It will be structured on tested trust. I'm using the same moments that tried to break you as anchors to hold the weight of what I'm about to release. I'm not discarding your sorrow. I'm redeeming it. I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm folding it into the foundation. Because only someone who suffered with me can carry glory without misusing it. This season you're entering is not random growth. It's prophetic construction. You will step into rooms and carry a sound that came from real wounds, not rehearsed words. And that authenticity will dismantle strongholds where empty speeches failed. So don't despise what hurt you. It became the raw material for what I'm building now. And as I take you deeper, remember, every scar has become stone in the walls of this assignment, and what I reveal next will demand the resilience only your history has produced. There were seasons when the quiet screamed louder than any storm. No answer came. No shift happened. No signs appeared. You kept showing up in prayer, whispering words that felt like they disappeared into nothingness. Yet even in that silence, you didn't walk away. You didn't stop listening, even when there was nothing to hear. You pressed your ear to my chest and waited, not because the silence made sense, but because you believed I was still there. That kind of faith changes atmospheres. What you didn't realize is that the silence was never empty. It was saturated with divine activity hidden from your eyes. I wasn't ignoring you. I was incubating what words could not yet carry. In the hush, I was aligning time, space, and people. I was orchestrating answers so precise that speaking too soon would have disrupted them. The quiet was not rejection. It was preparation for what couldn't be right. And now, that long, stretching stillness is about to erupt with the sound of fulfilled promises. What once felt like absence will now explode with evidence. The dry places are beginning to tremble because rain has been scheduled to fall in places where drought had taken root. You did stop believing, and now heaven is responding with a pace that will overwhelm the areas where you once felt forgotten. The very places that were void of clarity will now overflow with direction. The walls that once echoed with confusion will soon resound with testimonies. You honored me in the quiet. Now I'm honoring you with sound. And not just any sound, but the thunder of doors swinging open, of chains breaking suddenly, of delayed things arriving without resistance. This isn't random noise. It's the manifestation of my promise reverberating through every part of your story. Be ready. What happens next will not just fill the silence. It will redefine everything the silence protected. I kept count of what was taken. Every opportunity snatched prematurely. Every connection severed unjustly, every door slammed when you were ready to walk through it. None of it went unnoticed. What the enemy thought he removed permanently, I recorded with intention. Nothing vanished without purpose. I allowed certain things to be stripped, not to punish you, but to prove. Not to impoverish, but to prepare. And while the adversary celebrated each loss, believing he'd emptied your hands, I was preparing to fill them with more than what was taken. What was snatched in chaos will be restored in divine order. But I won't just give back what was lost, and I'm returning it in a form that carries weight and multiplication. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't chase what left. You let go with grace, even when it broke your heart. That posture qualified you for recovery beyond your imagination. You thought you were walking away from what you'd never see again, but what you actually did was sow. And what is sown in tears must return in glory. This recovery won't just comfort you. It will confuse those who thought the loss was final. I'm not simply putting pieces back together. I'm sending recompense wrapped in favor, surrounded by acceleration, dripping with oil that can't be bought. Where you once had limitation, you'll now see overflow. Where emptiness tried to define you, abundance will settle. You were quiet when you were robbed. Now watch me be loud as I restore. This is not about replacement. This is about fulfillment. I'm restoring years, not just moments. I'm reclaiming space that was once occupied by sorrow and rebuilding it with joy that will not decay. And I'm not stopping here, because what I'm about to release next is something you didn't even know was stolen. There are assignments I could not release until I knew your motives were purified, your ego dismantled, your heart fully yielded. You asked me for more, and I heard you. But more would have destroyed what I was trying to build if I had released it too soon. So I waited, not because I doubted you, but because I loved you too much to let you enter rooms your character couldn't sustain. I watched as pressure revealed the cracks that needed healing. I allowed delays to expose places still ruled by fear. And through every hard revelation, every silent refining, you chose transformation instead of rebellion. You let me reshape your desires. You laid down agendas and picked up assignments. You stopped striving for recognition and started hungering for revelation. That's when everything shifted. Because when I saw you worship without applause, serve without platform, and surrender when you had nothing left to offer, I knew you were ready. Ready for weight that requires clean hands. Ready for authority that doesn't compromise. Ready for assignments that influence generations but demand secrecy, holiness, and purity of heart. Now I can trust you to carry what others would exploit. I can place in your care what must never be mishandled. And this next phase isn't about success, it's about stewardship. What I release now isn't just blessing, it's responsibility. It's access to depths most never touch because they refuse the road you endured. But you didn't just want results. You wanted me. And because you chose me above outcomes, I'm choosing you to bear something sacred. Doors will open, but they will come with instructions. Opportunities will come, but they'll require discernment. You've been trained by fire. Now you will lead with oil. Stay close because the next release isn't just for you. It will impact others in ways you've yet to imagine. There were people who dismissed you the moment things didn't look successful. They calculated your worth based on visible progress and determined your value by outward momentum. Some secretly celebrated your delays. Others waited for your collapse, silently hoping that the promise you carried would dissolve under pressure. But I saw all of it. I heard every whispered doubt, every unspoken judgment. And while they assumed your silence meant defeat, I was building a table that would expose what I've been doing in you all along. Not to shame them, but to show them who sustained you. I wasn't late, I was deliberate. I wasn't punishing you, I was positioning you. Now, the place that looked like your ending will become the very platform for my glory to be seen. The table I'm setting is not just about provision. It's about vindication. It is not laced with revenge, but with revelation. They will see, and they will know, what survived the crushing has now been crowned. You will not have to speak for yourself. The evidence I pour out will answer what your words never could. This is not about boasting. It's about revealing my faithfulness in the life of the one who never let go. You didn't retaliate when you were overlooked. You didn't seek to prove yourself when they moved on. And now, because of that restraint, I'm preparing a display that no enemy can ignore. I've invited peace to sit with you. I've summoned restoration to take its place beside you. And joy, the kind that cannot be shaken, is being served in portions overflowing. You're not being elevated to impress, but to fulfill what was always written. Keep your posture steady. The table isn't a moment. It's a manifestation. And what I bring out next will leave no room for misunderstanding. Who opened the door when everything in you had a reason to promote your pain, defend your name, or demand to be seen? You chose silence. Not because you lacked strength, but because you had wisdom. You understood that the storm wasn't your platform. It was your proving ground. While others would have used hardship as an excuse to draw attention, you used it as a reason to go lower, to trust deeper, to stay hidden under my hand. And now, because you didn't exalt yourself in adversity, I'm exalting you in purpose. You didn't manipulate outcomes. You didn't twist situation to gain sympathy. You let me be your covering. You allowed me to speak for you when your name was misrepresented. And I will honor that restraint. I will lift what you refused to raise in your own strength. Because you passed the test of humility, I can now trust you with visibility. The elevation that's coming will not feel forced. It will feel familiar. It will feel like peace, not pressure. It will come not as a surprise, but as a confirmation of the character you chose to carry when everything screamed for reaction. You didn't let pride drive you. You didn't let ambition steer you. You waited, not just for results but for righteousness to lead. That's why I'm raising you in a way no man can hinder. What I'm building around you cannot be credited to talent or timing. It will be marked by submission. The foundation is stable because it was laid in hiddenness. And now, the rising will be undeniable, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. As I lift you, stay low in spirit. As I place you before others, stay anchored in devotion. Because the higher I take you, the more you'll need the posture that protected you in the valley. Don't look back. The wind is shifting, and what I'm about to set in motion will be bigger than you imagined, but made possible only because you refused to push your own name forward. Every decision you made in silence, every act of obedience that looked small in the moment, every time you chose to stay when walking away seemed easier, it wasn't just about your journey. It was about legacy. It was about bloodlines. It was about cycles being broken so the ones who come after you can begin where you refused to quit. This test wasn't merely a personal trial. It was a generational crossroads. What you endured, what you resisted, what you overcame in private, created ripple effects far beyond your lifetime. You thought you were just surviving, but in the spirit, you were dismantling patterns that existed for decades before you ever took your first breath. You've been undoing what others ignored. You've been repairing breaches you didn't even cause. And because of that, the children of tomorrow will stand on the foundation you laid in pain. You were the interruption. You were the shift. You were the one willing to bleed in order to build something that wouldn't collapse under pressure. And I need you to know, none of it was wasted. None of it went unnoticed. The walls you pushed through were not just barriers to your progress. They were prisons built to confine your lineage. And now that you've broken through, you've made room for a different future to emerge. They may never know the full weight of what you carried, but they will benefit from the liberty you refused to forfeit. That's why I'm blessing you publicly, not to reward ego, but to announce that a new order has begun. Because of you, the next generation won't have to fight the same battles. Because of you, I will show mercy to those still learning what you were willing to endure. You stood in the gap, and now I'm flooding that gap with grace that will stretch beyond your lifetime. Stay close. What I'm unfolding next will touch people you'll never meet, but it will bear your fingerprints in eternity. What you endured in silence wasn't just survival, it was seed. Every trial that nearly broke you, every night you wrestled with pain but refused to let bitterness grow, Every time you chose faith when despair called louder. Those moments built a testimony that now carries power far beyond your understanding. What you walk through privately will soon become the very story that unlocks deliverance in others who are bound by the same pain you overcame. Your story was never just yours, it was a key. And now, I'm placing it into the locks of hearts that don't even know they're waiting to be freed. You didn't just pass a test, you paved a way. And now I will lead people into your life, some silently suffering, others barely holding on, and they will find freedom not through your perfection, but through your scars. Not through your strength, but through your surrender. What once embarrassed you will now carry an anointing that breaks shame. What once made you weak will now cause others to rise. I'm not using the polished version of you. I'm using the real, broken, surrendered vessel that didn't walk away when it would have been easier. You'll see it in unexpected conversations, quiet moments, divine interruptions. Your words will carry weight because they were formed in fire. And when you speak, things will shift, not because of eloquence, but because of the authority forged in your furnace. This is why I allowed the delay. This is why I let the pressure persist, because what was being formed was never meant for you alone. It was always about impact. It was always about liberation. And what you're about to witness next is the fulfillment of a purpose that stretches far beyond your own healing. I'm sending you into places where freedom has been waiting, and now, it's time to unlock it. There were moments when you questioned everything, not just the journey, but yourself. You looked at the pressure, the confusion, the constant stretching, and quietly wondered if something was wrong with you. You compared your path to others whose process looked lighter, whose roads looked smoother, and you carried the weight of unseen warfare thinking you were the exception. But I was not punishing you. I was preparing you. What I called you to carry required a foundation that could not be shaken. And to build that, I had to remove the shallow ground. I had to dig deep. The test wasn't a result of failure, it was a sign of selection. Others were walking through open doors, but I was constructing in you a gate. You weren't late, you were being layered. Each hardship carved capacity. Every battle sculpted wisdom. And now that you're emerging from the fire, you'll begin to see clearly why it all had to unfold the way it did. The rejection you didn't understand protected you from attachments that would have sabotaged your future. The delay you resented preserved your purity from premature influence. The seasons of silence taught you to hear my voice without needing external affirmation. And the pressure, it built power. What others thought would destroy you actually developed muscles they don't even know exist. And very soon, you'll begin to walk into spaces that require every ounce of what was deposited in those dark seasons. Nothing was wasted, and nothing was random. I was building endurance in your spirit, discernment in your soul, and strength in your identity. Because where you're headed now is not for the faint-hearted. And this next assignment, it demands someone who's been tested beyond the surface. That's why I had to take you deeper than most. Not to hurt you, but to ensure that when I release you, you will not crumble under the weight of what's coming next, even as your heart receives these words, even before you speak another request. Things are shifting around you in real time. While your natural eye sees stillness, the realm of the unseen is erupting with divine motion. Assignments are being released. Doors are being unlocked. Delays are being dismantled. You're not waiting for something to start. You're standing in the middle of fulfillment already unfolding. I didn't need permission to begin. Your obedience gave me access long ago. And now, the angels assigned to your destiny are not standing still. They are executing instructions written for this exact hour. Conversations are happening in rooms you've never entered. Your name is being whispered in places where you've never stepped foot. And no, you don't need to force it. You don't need to fight for visibility. What is in motion cannot be undone. I've aligned people, times, and places with surgical precision. It's not just a blessing that's coming. It's divine orchestration that's already begun. You're not behind. You're not late. You're exactly where you need to be for what I've set in place to collide with your now. And it's not just about provision or promotion. It's about prophecy catching up to your posture. This is the moment your history beats your assignment. Every moment you stayed faithful, every second you kept your heart clean, every time you chose righteousness over revenge, it all became fuel for what's unfolding now. And as you continue reading, let this settle deeply in you. I'm not preparing to respond. I already have. You may not feel it yet, but manifestation is on its way with a pace you've never seen before. Don't be surprised when the next call changes everything. Don't doubt the sudden shift when the opportunity looks too perfect to be real. That's me. That's the movement of heaven answering the kind of surrender I couldn't ignore. And what's coming next will carry a speed only explained by supernatural involvement. This moment marks more than a shift in your surroundings. It's the unraveling of every limitation that once wrapped itself around your name. What's being set in motion isn't just about doors, opportunities, or blessings. I am going deeper than provision. I'm reaching into your origin, touching the roots, untangling generational knots that tried to hold you hostage. The pages you thought were permanent are being revised by my hand. I'm not editing your past, I'm resurrecting purpose from it. Where others saw cycles, I'm scripting redemption. Where failure tried to narrate your future, I'm inserting a plot twist that only heaven could conceive. You didn't just endure to get by, you endured to become. That's why the atmosphere around you is beginning to feel different. You've crossed an invisible line, and now everything attached to your obedience is being pulled into alignment. Even family patterns that plagued bloodlines before you are bowing to the new authority you carry. What confused you before will now become clear. What hindered your parents will not hinder you. What was impossible for others in your lineage will become standard for you. Because you did give up when the pain screamed for closure. I am giving you more than ending. I am giving you a new beginning, one that carries the power to define a future no one expected. And your descendants, they'll benefit from battles they never had to fight. Because of your choices, they'll inherit wholeness instead of wounds, clarity instead of confusion, favor instead of fear. This is why it felt heavier for you, because you were carrying the weight of not just your freedom, but the restoration of a line I've been waiting to redeem. I'm writing a new story, not with ink, but with evidence. And what I bring next will not remind you of where you came from. It will announce where I'm taking you. There are tasks in heaven that remained on pause, not because they were denied, but because they were waiting for your surrender to reach the point of release. The messengers of my will, those commissioned to execute what was written about you long before time, have stood watchfully at the edge of their assignments, holding promises wrapped in divine timing. They were not sent prematurely, because I protect what I ordain. But now that your spirit has passed through fire and emerged with unwavering trust, I am activating what was reserved. These aren't random interventions. They are precise movements of angelic operation, divinely synchronized to intersect with your obedience. You've stepped into the timing where heaven is no longer waiting. What you don't see in the natural is already being executed in the spiritual. Routes are being cleared, barriers are being dismantled, instructions are being delivered into the hands of those who carry influence in places you've never walked. Not by coincidence, by design. Some of these angels were assigned to you before your first breath, and now their mission enters motion. They will touch paperwork, cause systems to align, soften hardened hearts, and reroute decisions that once seemed irreversible. And you won't need to force a thing. You will witness open doors you never knocked on. You will see battles end without ever lifting your voice in defense. This isn't because of effort. It's because of timing. And timing bows to obedience. Now that you've surrendered the plan, I'm unleashing the strategy. Don't be surprised by swift resolutions. Don't be alarmed when things start aligning before you even ask. It's not luck. It's not coincidence. It's what happens when heaven's hosts are finally released to deliver what has been sealed, waiting for a moment like this. What I release next will carry signatures not from earth, but from realms you've touched only through prayer. Not every battle is visible. Not every victory is seen by the crowd, but heaven watches differently. I saw when you resisted the urge to retaliate, when you chose mercy over judgment, when you trusted me instead of rushing into panic. These decisions didn't just define your journey, they rewrote your status in the spiritual realm. What was once contested is now confirmed. What was once delayed is now documented. Your name hath been marked, not as one who merely survived, but as one who stood when surrender would have been easier. There is a record that angels hold, not written with ink, but etched by fire, sealed in surrender, soaked in the oil of consistency. You didn't just pass a test. You crossed into legacy. You belong to a lineage of those who didn't quit, who didn't trade promise for popularity, who didn't compromise when the cost felt unbearable. That lineage is not built by crowds, it's built by covenant. And your name has now been placed among those who finished their process in integrity. This scroll carries authority. It bears witness before thrones. It is proof that when you were tempted to give up, you chose me instead. And now that the record is complete, I am giving you access to promises others forfeited. Doors that were sealed for generations are opening because your endurance has made you trustworthy. What's written about you cannot be erased. It cannot be argued. The enemy's accusations hold no weight against what I've documented in your obedience. And the scroll speaks louder than opinions. It testifies when your voice is tired. It opens gates when systems say no. It confirms your authority in places your feet have not yet touched. And soon, you'll see the impact of being recorded in my courts, because what's being unlocked next will require a scroll bearer to carry it. They thought it was over for you. They counted you out when circumstances turned cold. They interpreted your silence as weakness, your humility as defeat, and your endurance as delay without fruit. They misunderstood the stillness of your season, assuming it was emptiness. But I was planting something under the surface. And now that the roots have reached maturity, I am bringing forth evidence in full view. Those who spoke too soon, those who mocked your patience, those who celebrated your struggle, they are not being shamed, but they will witness the very thing they declared would never happen. I'm not elevating you to prove them wrong. I'm exalting my faithfulness through your story. Your rise is not about revenge. It's about revelation. It's about showing what happens when someone chooses me instead of noise, when someone obeys instead of retaliating, when someone stays low while others race to be seen. I am vindicating you, not with words but with undeniable fruit. You will walk into rooms they said were locked to you. You will carry blessings they thought you forfeited. And you won't need to explain how it happened. I will make it plain. They will see, and they will know. It was me who lifted you. It was me who preserved you. It was me who covered you when they tried to bury your name under doubt. Their eyes will not just see the blessing. They'll witness the peace that surrounds you. They will see the strength in your silence, the favor wrapped in your footsteps, the clarity that comes from communion. And some will be changed by it. Your life will become a mirror, showing them what trust produces when it's unshaken. Don't gloat. Don't bloat. Stay in the posture that got you here. Stay hidden in me. Because what I release next will silence every tongue that ever rose to cancel what I ordained before they ever spoke. This journey reshaped you at your core. The fire you endured didn't just refine your path, it rewired your identity. The person who began this process, who stood at the edge of surrender asking for direction, no longer exists in the form that entered. What you went through carved out things you didn't even realize were there. Fear that masked itself as strategy, insecurity that posed as humility, anxiety disguised as ambition. The pressure stripped it all away. And now, I am not sending you back to pick up what I already burned off. That version of you, the one who doubted their authority, second-guessed their worth, and looked for permission from others to move forward, that version cannot go with you into what I'm unfolding next. You are not returning to normal. You are not reverting to familiar rhythms. You have crossed into a realm where your inside has been sharpened, your capacity expanded, your spirit matured. This is not a reset. This is a resurrection. You are walking in clarity now, not confusion. You are led by revelation, not reaction. And the things that once lured you back into hesitation no longer hold the same grip. Your appetite has changed. What used to entertain you now feels shallow. What once distracted you now feels empty. That's how you know transformation has taken root. I've grown you beyond what once defined you. You no longer fit in the spaces that celebrated your stagnation. And I'm not calling you to shrink to be understood. I'm calling you to rise into who I've been shaping all along. This version of you sees differently, moves wisely, discerns deeper, and carries peace that isn't based on perfection, but alignment. So don't grieve who you were. Celebrate who you've become. That wilderness did more than test you. It matured you. And the assignment I place before you now requires nothing less than who you are today. You passed this season, but more importantly, you grew through it. Now walk forward. The former things have passed. You will not be the same. Amen. What tried to break you actually confirmed your promotion. Every wave that crashed over your soul was not a sign of failure. It was the signal that you were being elevated through process, not applause. The ache in your spirit, the disappointment you couldn't explain, the spiritual exhaustion you learned to carry with grace, none of it removed you from my plan. Instead, it positioned you more precisely. You see, the world labels pain as punishment. But in my kingdom, pain can become passage. I didn't choose to hurt you, I chose to trust you. I trusted you with fire because I knew what would remain after the burn. I allowed the pressure not to destroy, but to define. I saw beyond the moments you doubted your worth, beyond the days you thought you had nothing left to offer. I saw what pain was unearthing, the gold of perseverance, the flame of devotion, the unshakable root of surrender. Your name wasn't removed from my promise when you cried. It wasn't erased when you struggled to understand. On the contrary, the more you leaned in when everything told you to let go, the more clearly heaven identified you as qualified. You didn't numb the pain. You didn't pretend it didn't exist. You faced it and still chose me. That's what graduates a soul. Not perfection, but persistence. Not ease, but endurance. I've been under by suffering, I've been bite. And now, the scars you carry are no longer symbols of defeat. They are signatures of destiny. They testify that what came to destroy couldn't finish the job. You walk through the furnace, and instead of smoke, you carry fragrance. Instead of bitterness, you walk with fire. You are no longer who you were before this. You've outgrown the limitations of old battles. And now, you're ready to hold what only the broken but still believing can carry. The crown wasn't awarded at your strongest, it was confirmed in your weakness. And that is where I release what comes next. There were situations that left others bitter, yet you became softer. There were trials that shattered others' hope, but in you they carved deeper wells of trust. You walked through fires that should have altered your identity, yet you emerged with deeper compassion, sharper discernment, and steadier faith. This is not common. This is covenant. You didn't just survive what came against you. You allowed it to refine what was hidden within you. And now, I can trust you with assignments others mishandled. I can place within your hands what I've had to withhold from many, not because they weren't loved, but because they wouldn't surrender. What you did, you didn't use the pain as an excuse to pull away. You used it as a reason to press in. And now, the strength formed in secret is making you a trustworthy vessel in public. I'm assigning greater weight to your words. I'm multiplying the impact of your obedience. I'm allowing your presence to carry an authority birthed through suffering. That authority cannot be imitated, bought, or borrowed. It can only be received through brokenness passed through fire. Others will see you rise and assume it came easily. But I know the layers you shed, the prayers you groaned, the nights you questioned everything and still chose me. What broke others revealed your root. And now, I'm entrusting you with more. Not to make you famous, but to make me known. Not to elevate your image, but to extend my reach. You will not carry this new mantle for applause, but for alignment. I will send people to you who need what I poured into your spirit while you were hidden. I will draw lives to your light, not because you're perfect, but because you stayed. You stayed when it cost. You stayed when it was quiet. You stayed when it didn't make sense. And now, I'm handing you more, because what tried to destroy you ended up proving you. Amen.